A tough weekend in Wales. Arthur stood at a bus stop in the pouring rain. His posture was terrible because he was exhausted. He had put on his brightest, most bold yellow coat and green Wellingtons, but he still felt miserable. He had received a text from his girlfriend, Elspeth, saying she was almost there. Arthur sighed. He had suffered through the worst 24 hours of his life, and he didn't know how to explain it all. It had all started at the barber. Arthur had wanted to look handsome for Elspeth, so he had visited a new hairdresser in town. However, the man had been very clumsy. By the time Arthur realized what was happening, the barber had used a strong dye and a very hot hairdryer. Arthur appeared in the mirror nearly bald with patches of blue. He had groaned in horror while the barber just gave him a nervous grin. After the hair disaster, Arthur had ridden his bike through the local park. He had promised to help an old neighbor collect leaves, so he had brought a rake and a broom. But the grass was slippery. He had fallen onto a wet mat of leaves and slid right into a fence. A sharp bolt on the fence had given his tire a puncture. He had tried to fix the inner tube, but he had only managed to get dirty. When Elspeth finally arrived at the station, she looked confused. "Why are we here, Arthur?" she asked. "I thought we were going to see Wales." Arthur realized his mistake. He had booked a trip to Wales, the country, not a boat trip to see the giant mammals. "I thought thou wouldst like the mountains," he joked, using the word thou to sound like an old poet. Elspeth didn't laugh. She was too busy looking at his blue bald head. They went to stay in a hotel nearby, but the trouble continued. The hotel staff were very strict. One clerk told Arthur he couldn't bring all his stuff into the lobby. Arthur had brought a large flip chart because he had planned to show Elspeth a presentation about their future. He deemed it very important, but the clerk refused. In the corner, there were two men shouting at a TV while they watched an MMA fight. Arthur wanted to make the evening romantic. He had found a small fireplace in their room. No one was there except Arthur, so he decided to light a fire. He had put a small rug in front of the hearth. He used a metal poker to move the logs. However, he had turned on a desk fan because the room was hot. The fan had blown a spark onto the rug. With the exception of a few seconds of warmth, the plan was a disaster. Arthur had to extinguish the flames quickly. He had used a bucket of water, but the room was a mess. By the time the fire brigade arrived, the fire was already out. A tall firefighter looked at Arthur, who had smeared black soot all over his face. Elspeth walked in, just as the man was taking pictures of the damage for his report. Arthur had tried to dress up in a suit, but now he just looked like a coal miner. "Let's just go to the cinema," Elspeth suggested. They went to see a movie, hoping for one of those famous Hollywood thrillers. However, they had to struggle through 30 minutes of teasers and trailers. Arthur kept nodding off, 'cause he was so tired from his long day. Though they were in a dark theater, Elspeth could still see the blue patches on his head every time the screen got bright. At dawn, the rain finally stopped and the sky was clear. Arthur looked out the window and found out that the luxury lake mentioned in the hotel brochure was actually just a large puddle in the parking lot. He saw a woman outside trying to paddle through it while walking her poodle. The hotel wasn't clean, the trip wasn't what they expected, and Arthur's bike tire was still a flat ball of rubber. Arthur looked at Elspeth and gave a weak grin. She gave him a little wink and laughed. "Arthur, you are a disaster," she said. "We should reschedule this trip for when your hair grows back." They decided to fly home the next day instead of riding the broken bike. They had survived a very tough weekend, but at least they had a funny story to tell.